Right boys, so in this video this is basically going to be a book summary, but I'm going to talk about the main points I took away from two books. The first one we're going to talk about is Diminishing by Dr Anna Lembke, so that's this book here. And then afterwards we'll touch briefly on another book called Your Brain on Porn by Gary Wilson. Diminishing is about the pain-pleasure response in the brain and how this can sometimes get hijacked and cause things like addiction. And then Your Brain on Porn is just kind of an extension of that, and it's one of these ways that the modern world can mess with that pain-pleasure response and cause you to get hooked on certain things. And it's just like a progressive step past lower level addictions onto porn. So we'll talk about actionable steps we can take to avoid some of these pitfalls of modern life and these hyper-stimulating things, so that we don't get addicted and we can have a good balance of pain and pleasure and a good baseline, so we're not relying on stimulus to feel normal. So I have made a previous video about the pain and pleasure response, and you might want to check that out because it gives you a graph that you can track whether you're too far in the pain or pleasure and kind of visualize where you are on that scale. So that will help you work this out, but I'll give you a brief description of how the pain pleasure response works, and then we'll talk more about implications and how to avoid addiction. So what is the pain pleasure response? So it's basically we are rewarded for life affirming activities and we feel pain in things that aren't life affirming. So this just keeps us alive. It's a survival mechanism. So eating food is required to survive. If we don't do it, we die. So when we eat food, we are affirmed that behavior by a reward, and that's chemicals in the brain. So that could be dopamine, serotonin, and other chemicals. So when you do something that is life affirming, you'll get rewarded for it. Now that's fine in a world that is scarce. So normally if I was out living here in the woods, for me to get food to eat, so we have red squirrels in this forest, we also have foxes, rabbits. Now I've tried catching rabbits and it's not easy. I was unsuccessful, do you know what I mean? So it's not that easy to acquire food out in nature. Even foraging for, like, there's mushrooms grow out here, you've got certain leaves, and there's hazel trees, so hazelnuts. It's not that easy to provide food for yourself. We live in an artificially abundant age where you can just go to a supermarket, go to your local store and get more food than you need. So that's not normal. What is normal is to be basically starving most of the time. It's like foxes. When I walk to work, I see this fox, and I always see him every day and I'll feed him and he's like my little buddy. But whenever I see foxes, if I'm down the seafront and I see a fox, it always strikes me how skinny they are. And that's because acquiring food is not easy. That's why they'll hang around, like this fox hangs around at the same time when I walk to work, because he knows people feed him and he's near a McDonald's, so he can scavenge for food. But acquiring food and even water for yourself, or it could be a partner, or just you can look at, I think it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you look at that, it's like a pyramid of what we need. You've got food, water, shelter, warmth, sexual partner, a social tribe to be a part of, and then it goes up the ladder, like up the pyramid to more. Once you've fulfilled the baseline, then you get other things like self-actualization and your purpose and things like that. But we all need these baseline things, and they're not easy to get hold of. But in today's world, say the urge for sex, you can trigger more sex hormones in your brain through watching porn than our ancestors, in a 10-minute period, than our ancestors would have had in a lifetime. So when you see, say, a naked woman, that's going to trigger things in your brain. Now you can look at, because of the internet, more naked women than your ancestors would have seen throughout their whole life. Now that is what they call a supernatural stimulus. It's not normal, it exceeds the norm. So when you do a life-affirming activity, you're rewarded for it with brain chemicals. When you do something that isn't life-affirming, it feels painful. And that's meant to be in balance to keep you doing things that keep you alive, essentially. So it's a survival mechanism. Now, it isn't just a case of when you do something life-affirming, you get a positive reinforcement and then you come back down to baseline. And when you do a negative thing, you feel pain and then you come back up to baseline. Or you don't just stay there, so you don't eat one meal and then you're satiated for the rest of your life because you wouldn't eat a second meal. So what actually happens, you would assume that you eat a meal, you're rewarded for behaviour that's going to keep you alive, and then it will come back to baseline, and then you'll eat again. But that's not what happens. You eat a meal, you go above baseline and you feel good, so it reinforces the life-affirming activity. But then you'll dip down, and the author says, pleasure is compensated for by a swing into pain. So you swing up into pleasure, and then immediately after the pleasure you dip down into the pain. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So to the degree that you were satisfied by the meal, you will feel a certain level of discomfort after the meal, then you'll level out back to normal. And then you'll seek your next meal or your next whatever it happens to be. And another factor to this, with repeated exposure, the same stimulus doesn't stimulate you as much. So say for example you're at baseline and you eat an ice cream, and that feels really good. You get a good spike of dopamine and you feel good. When you have a second ice cream, the same thing, so you eat exactly the same ice cream again, it will spike pleasure, but not to the same degree that the first ice cream did. Now, if you repeatedly do that, by the 10th ice cream, you're basically sick of it, so you're actually dipping down into the pain response. So repeated exposure to a similar stimulus will not increase pleasure like indefinitely. It will just, eventually you'll dip down into pain and it will become painful. When you overeat, you become lethargic and it's actually not enjoyable. So this whole process is triggered by cues. So we've associated certain things, and cues are usually people, places and things. So our brain has associated certain people, places and things with these life-affirming behaviours that trigger dopamine, that give us a pleasure response. So say you're addicted to drugs. I am not addicted to the same drugs you are, and I don't know the same people you do, but you might associate your mate Dave with drugs. So every time you see Dave, you start craving this certain drug that you use. Now I don't know Dave and I'm not addicted to the drug that he sells. Like, he might be a drug dealer is what I'm saying. I don't associate Dave with that drug. So when I see Dave, I'm basically indifferent. Like when I walk down the road and I see a lot of people, they mean nothing to me. But to you, that might be an ex-partner. So when you walk past somebody, there is a very, like a really strong response is elicited. And to me, I don't even know the person, so it doesn't matter. So people, places and things. So certain people you're going to associate. I have this with my family. One of the things that I try and moderate is what I eat. I try not to overeat or eat hyperpalatable, unhealthy things. Now, all of my family, from when I've grown up, I mean, my food was provided by my parents, so that is my family. I'm associating them with food. I associate all of those with bad food, because normally when I see my family, we're getting together and we're eating bad food, essentially. So I associate my family, that's people, with bad food. Places. I mean, the fridge is a good example. When you open the fridge, if there's always, or the freezer, if there's always Ben and Jerry's in the freezer, ice cream that's unhealthy, you're going to associate that place with binge eating food that you shouldn't be eating. And things. You might, an iPhone for example, if you have trouble with porn and addiction to porn, your phone or your laptop might be the thing, the item that cues up that response. So cravings are triggered by cues, and your cues are people, places and things. So another kind of negative side effect of this is repeated exposure to the same or similar stimulus doesn't increase pleasure anymore. But with prolonged and repeated exposure to pleasure, our capacity to tolerate pain decreases and our threshold for experiencing pleasure increases. We now need more reward to feel pleasure and less injury to feel pain. So the more you're giving yourself this rewarding behaviour or this rewarding stimulus, the more of it you need to feel good. And when you take it away, you'll feel bad really quickly. And so the problem with this isn't how the world works. If you're constantly, say you eat, and I'll just give you an example. If you're hungry and you haven't eaten for 24 hours, you have gone down into the pain. So you've started off at baseline, you've progressively got hungrier, and now you're down here. Well, now, if you eat a piece of broccoli, that broccoli is going to taste good because you was in the pain, you eat the broccoli, and broccoli tastes good. Now, broccoli is quite bland. Some people it might be their favourite food, but in comparison to ice cream, broccoli is bland. So you're in pain, you eat a piece of broccoli, and you feel really satisfied. Now, if for the last 24 hours, instead of being fasted and not eating, you had been eating donuts every hour, so every hour you had a donut. So every hour you're at baseline, one donut, oh, that felt good, that felt good. You're building up your tolerance to pleasure. Now, the same 24-hour period has passed, but now you eat a piece of broccoli. I've literally done this, so I know. The broccoli tastes like shit. You don't want to eat it. It tastes bland. Compared to all the sugar you've just consumed, you actually feel like spitting it out. It's not nice. So this is why intermittent fasting helps you stick to healthy foods. The two habits stack together really nicely, because if you've fasted for 18 hours overnight, when you eat your first meal, it could be broccoli, it could be a salad, it could be a piece of chicken. It will taste really good. You don't need to add ketchup or sauces or things to the chicken. The bland, dry chicken will taste nice. So what this does is, when you constantly, life is too pleasurable and too easy, you can't handle life anymore. Because the reality of life is quite hard. Like, living out here would be very difficult. To get food would be hard. For me to get food, I just walk to the local shop. I'm 5 minutes away from food, more food than I could possibly need at any time. So the reality of life is actually quite difficult. But say, for example, temperature. When you live in a house, you can turn the temperature to exactly what you want, so you never have to feel overly cold or overly hot. Out here, when I make these videos, I've noticed I'm normally a bit colder than I'd like, and in the summer I'll be a bit hotter than I'd like. But when you have a temperature controlled house and then you jump in your car and that's the same temperature, that's artificial. Life is actually harder than that. So if you're constantly in the pleasure response, constantly eating enough, eating a bit more than you need, being nice and warm, if you're a bit lonely, you might go on social media and feel better. When you take that away, your tolerance to life, the reality of life, which is actually quite difficult, you can't handle it. And that's where I think depression and anxiety and things like that come in. So the main takeaway, I experienced depression, and the conclusion I came to, quite severe very severe depression, and I've sorted that out now. And it was purely because life was too easy. I'd out-pleasured myself, so anytime I removed these stimulus, life just felt horrible. It felt dark and bleak and hopeless. Now, the last thing people that are depressed want to hear is your life's too easy, because it's very difficult. It's harder than the average person's life that's not struggling with this, that they're just on baseline. So that's the pain pleasure response. Like I say, I check out my other video where I go deep into that. But what is addiction? Addiction is the continued and compulsive use of a substance or behaviour despite harm to self and others. So you continue to do an activity that harms you or other people, and you continue to do it. So you would just stop. If you wasn't addicted to it, you would just stop doing that thing. So an example of that is, you eat palatable foods and you overeat and you gain weight. Now, you don't like the fact that you're gaining weight, but you keep eating. So you're addicted to food. So what I learned from this point is, addiction we used to associate with very hard things like weed, alcohol, like an alcoholic, or heroin, or some cocaine, some hard drugs, right? But under this definition of addiction, pretty much all of us are addicts now, in one form or another. I think I checked the statistics in the UK, 60% of adults between 45 and 70 are overweight. So they're addicted to food. 60% of that age range are addicted to food. Now, there'll be something in your life where you fall under the category of addiction. For me, it has been food, social media, and just screen time, like addicted to technology, and porn. So these are three things. It's never been gambling or alcohol or weed or other drugs like that, but they're the three that I'm addicted to. So pretty much everybody is an addict. When you walk down the road, and sugar, I would say the two things that need to be addressed in society isn't, like, one of them isn't smoking. There was a time when smoking was an issue, and that now I'm not addicted to smoking. Both of my parents smoke and a lot of my friends smoke, and I'm not addicted to smoking. And I think the stigma and the mindset around smoking has changed. But it hasn't changed with sugar. Somebody can drink a can of Monster Energy, stood next to somebody smoking, and the Monster Energy drinker would frown upon the smoker and be like, "You're smoking." Well, and there would be someone stood next to him on his phone on social media. So this is why it's rampant. So sugar and screen time, they are the two massive addictions currently facing our society, as far as I can tell. And this is important because if you're raising children or you are the role model for younger people, you have to get this right. I've got two young nieces, and whenever I see them eating foods that are full of sugar, I just think, if you've experienced being overweight, you'll know that that tarnishes and diminishes every aspect of your life. If you're overweight, every aspect of your life, your self-confidence, your ability to talk to people, to attract people that you want to have intimate relationships with, or whatever it is, all of it is worsened by being fat. Nobody that's fat, as far as I know, likes being fat. Now, there'll be people that say you can be happy and healthy and be fat or overweight, and I disagree. I've been overweight and I'm now what's considered a normal weight, and I would much rather be a normal weight. So if we don't address this in our children, if we allow our children to go through the same thing as us, I see that as a form of child abuse. If you're giving your kids sugar, now they might not be exposed to addiction, they might not be predisposed to addiction, and they might not get addicted to food, and they can eat the sugar within moderation, and that's fine. But 60% of people can't. So we have to be the role models for the next generation coming up. And it's just a mindset. People have done this with smoking, and will do this with sugar, and will do it with technology. The problem with these, though, is they have become acceptable addictions. So when you see someone eating a donut or a hyper-processed sugar food, or like Monster, I do look at them and think, that's mad that they're eating that much sugar. But that's just normal in our society, and it won't be long before people look at people that are eating sugar and be like, damn, that's mad. In the same way that we do that with smoking, and vaping will be the same. And like looking at porn, that's considered acceptable. Like, that's a normal behaviour, and if you want to do it in the privacy of your own home. But I think it's damaging, and we will start changing our mindset on it. But sugar's the main one. So in the book, Dr Lembke says that the main risk factor for addiction is easy exposure to the thing. And that is why sugar and technology is causing problems now. You can go to any shop, you just fill up your car with petrol, you go into the petrol garage to buy your fuel, there's sugar, chocolate bars, all kinds of food available. It's easily available. It's actually harder to find real food in a petrol garage. And the same is true for technology and screen time. You have it in your pocket at a moment's notice. It's always accessible. Now, there are things you can do with the sugar and the food. You can remove it from your home and not go to places where it's available. But I haven't really seen a solution where you can remove technology, because it's so integral to our lives now. And I've spoke about this before, but I don't believe in free will. I think if you remove something from your environment, you don't need free will not to do it. And Dr Lembke mentions that in her book as well. So being addicted to heroin, you're probably not addicted to heroin, but you probably are addicted to sugar. Because, I mean, I'm just speaking from experience. I don't know anyone that sells heroin. I don't know where to get it. But I do know where to get sugar. I've got a sugar dealer on every corner, and so have you. So this becomes a problem because it's easy not to be addicted. And like, your children aren't going to be addicted to heroin because you would never expose them to it. And the same is true for smoking. You think, well, I won't introduce them to that, but you probably already have introduced them to a screen and sugar. And I anticipate I think the sugar one will get better. I think people will just realise how good they feel when they're eating real foods, and I speak about real foods on this channel all the time. And then they will adopt real food just naturally. That will just be, people will naturally shift over, like people naturally stop smoking. Now there are some like societal pressures and government pressures, but for the most part people will just go, I feel like shit when I eat shit, I'm going to start eating real food. And they'll look to other people, like on this YouTube channel, what's he eating? How does he feel? And I've done the same. I looked at, I think it's Eddie Abu, an ex-bodybuilder, is just blowing up on Instagram because he's just talking about real food, which shows he's gained like 100,000 subscribers in 100,000 followers, sorry, in a 24-hour period. 1 million subscribers in like a couple of weeks. That just shows 1 million followers in a couple of weeks. That just shows that the message is resonating and it's becoming a trend, and that's good. But I anticipate the trend of screens and being addicted to technology will get worse because of things like they've just released the Apple Vision and the Meta Quest virtual reality goggles. That just makes it even more accessible. You can have it permanently, you're looking through it now. You don't have to pick up a phone to look at the addictive thing. So some of the other risk factors for addiction are biological parents with addiction, mental illness like depression, anxiety, bipolar and OCD, trauma, social upheaval and poverty. So social upheaval, I think we're seeing, well, there is social upheaval. You've just got to look at the news and look on Twitter and see that, you know, socially there's pressures going on. And poverty. Is everybody living in abundance and they have plenty of money to provide for themselves and their family? Now that's something you can ask yourself. What situation are you in? Poverty doesn't mean living under a park bench eating chips out of the bin. Like, are you stressing about money? If you are, that is a risk factor for addiction. So now we know what addiction is and what are the main addictions that we're probably going to face. It's worth noting that food and internet tech companies promote compulsive overconsumption. It is engineered into their products. They are designed to be addictive, not just available. So take my butcher, for example, or my local farm. I get my beef from a local farm, which I bang on about all the time, but I think that's a good thing. So their product is available to me. It's not, they don't promote it in an addictive overconsumption kind of way. So if I need beef, I text Sharon from the farm and I go down and I buy beef off her. It's a single ingredient, there's just beef in there. There's nothing in there that's making that addictive to me. So I'm not like craving beef and I see a cow and now I've got to go to buy beef. No, it's available to me and when I need it I go and buy it. That's not the case with food and technology. Food, take McDonald's for example, their Coca-Cola has caffeine in it because caffeine is addictive. So not only are they making it available, if I want to take my family to McDonald's I can, but they're making it addictive that once I've taken my family to McDonald's I will crave to do that again because of the high sugar, caffeine and other things added to their food. So that's food. When you buy any chocolate bar, any processed food, just look at the ingredients list. If you buy a piece of food and there's more than one ingredient and one of the ingredients is sugar, and there are many names for sugar, like Shreddies for example has 4 different types of sugar in it. If one of the ingredients is sugar, that product, that piece of food has been designed to encourage you to overconsume it. Not just be available to you so you can consume it, but overconsume it. The same is true for technology. Instagram, I'll just use Instagram as an example. One, they're showing very addictive content anyway, but they have a feature called infinite scrolling. There used to be a time, I think this was on Facebook, I don't know if it was the same on Instagram, where you would scroll down your feed and at a certain point there'll be a thing that pops up. You like run out of things to look at because you're all caught up. You've finished looking at everything all of your friends have posted. Now because of infinite scrolling, it doesn't end. You can use that endlessly, and your brain is trying to figure out what thing am I going to get next. So that isn't designed to just be available to you. If Facebook was designed that way, it would just have the things your friends follow, and then you'd run out of things to look at. So it's available if you want to look at it. Now it's designed to increase overconsumption. So this is something you want to be mindful of for yourself and children or young people that you're influencing. So people are falling for this and they don't even realise, and they're getting diagnosed with things like ADHD and anxiety, when in reality they could just be sleep deprived and overstimulated. So if you don't make the link, I think most people know this by now, but if you don't know that this is how these things, well, I'm not addicted to beef, but I am addicted to McDonald's or whatever it happens to be. If you don't know how this works and how the pain-pleasure response in your brain works, you might diagnose yourself with an eating disorder before you just think, well, no, the foods are designed to be addictive. That's not on me. They've designed it this way. And say you've got anxiety and you don't want to go out and be social. We'll talk about the social aspect of this. But you don't have anxiety, you're just overstimulated and you can't deal with people. So this is a result of what you've been exposed to. So this is kind of an unrelated point in the book, but I'll just mention it now. She used the phrase, youth compensates for so much. And I've experienced this, and I think this to be absolutely true. The age 27 or thereabouts seems very significant to me. I've just turned 28, but I find it around 25 to 27, there's kind of like a transition period that you go through. And prior to 25, I could eat what I want, I could basically get away with all the bad habits I wanted to do, and I basically still felt alright, I could still function. You hit an age, and I believe it's 27, and there are a lot of famous people, I won't say it, but that unalive themselves. You know, that they have a crisis and no longer want to be here anymore. And that happens at 27. If you Google it, it's like a thing. A lot of people do it at 27. And I think you go through a transition where youth is compensating for all these things. So you might be able to scroll social media, you might be able to eat sugar, not get enough sleep, not hydrate enough. And because you're young, your life force of being young kind of keeps you going, but that does run out. And then that's what the aging process is. As you get older and older, you get more frail and more vulnerable to these things. But youth compensates for so much. And if I could go back and tell my younger self, I would be like, you want to sort this out before you're 25. Because you will start it, and if you don't sort it out by 25, you'll just progressively get worse. And in our society, we will see a lot of people progressively quickly decline in health and mental health because of this 27-year-old rule. You can get away with it, you don't feel like it's affecting you. So if you're under 27 and you're watching this, you want to start this as soon as possible. If you're around 27, let me know in the comments what your experience has been. Have you felt like a shift where, yeah, I can't get away with these things anymore? And if you're older than 27, think back, did you experience that around that time? So this is just something I've noticed. So what's the solution? So the one word answer to all of this is presence. You can solve all of these problems by being present without stimulation. All of these problems come from an overstimulation. So the opposite of overstimulation is essentially boredom. If I stand here and scroll on Instagram while I'm stood in this forest, I'm going to get all kinds of tantalizing, interesting videos and pictures. And that's stimulating my brain. Whereas if I just stand here and stare at the trees, that's boring reality in comparison. Now, it's not boring, it's just normal reality. But when you've been scrolling Instagram, it becomes boring. So you be present, you quit your vices, you stop all of these addictions. And it's easy to say, well, the solution to addiction is to just stop doing the thing you're addicted to. But you want to... That is essentially the answer. There's no two ways about it. But so this would be called a dopamine detox. So you stop any unnecessary artificial dopamine. You abstain from your vices like overeating sugar or watching porn or social media or even drugs or alcohol, whatever it is, you stop doing those. And Dr. Lembke says this takes 4 weeks. So before you even assess whether something's working or not, you have to give it 4 weeks of pure abstinence. So one practice is to be mindful. So once you know, and I would recommend watching my other video on pain and pleasure, but once you know this chart, there's a graph I use to visualize whether you're in the pain or in the pleasure. Once you know this, at any moment you can plot where you are on the graph. So say you've decided that your habit you're going to quit is eating processed sugary foods, right? So you're just eating healthy foods. As soon as you do that, you'll dip down into pain, and you might dip down quite hard depending on how much pleasure you've been experiencing. Now, normally what you would do is instantly look for a cue and try and find something, like things would cue a craving, and then you would just go and eat the food, it'll make you feel better, but you haven't solved the problem. So map out in your mind or on a bit of paper, right, I'm down here in the pain. The way I get back up to baseline and even into pleasure is by doing nothing. You literally have to do nothing. Your normal response is to do something, which is eat the food. What you have to do is nothing, and just slowly your pain will diminish to the point where you're back at baseline. Now, like alcoholics will struggle with this because they've got a lot of pleasure, they're deep in the pain, and it's unbearable. You can't dwell in that pain without just having another drink. So if you're not too addicted to something, this will be easier. But so you're dipping into the pain when you stop the thing, and the answer is be present and do nothing, and be mindful. Look at your situation. Right, I feel pain. Why do I feel pain? Oh, it's because every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I've dipped down into the pain. This is temporary, and if I wait long enough, I'll come back to baseline. So in the book, the author says, if we wait long enough, our brains readapt and we establish baseline. And that can only be done by abstaining from the addictive thing. So, whenever I am trying to help people or myself avoid any kind of addiction, and normally the one I talk about is food addiction, always change your environment. So the cues that cue up cravings are people, places and things. And I think places is the biggest one. In the book, the author says willpower is limited, so you want to make it as easy as you want for yourself. I would go as far to say, and I've come across this in other books, that willpower doesn't exist. That you're going to either do the thing or not, but if it's not in your environment, you won't do it. So in terms of changing your environment for a food addiction, if you have, like in my house, we've got like, you know, people have like the cookie jar. We've got like this cabinet where all the bad food is, because I still live with my family that eat this, and I don't. Now, the easiest way to not crave food is to just remove all of the bad food from your house. Then it makes it easier to not do the thing, because now if I want bad food, I've got to leave the house and go and buy some, which is like 5 minutes down the road to the shop. Whereas if it's there in the cupboard, you can just go and get it. So, like the author said at the beginning, the main risk factor for addiction is easy access to the thing. So you need to remove easy access to the thing. Now, that's easier with food because you can change what's in your fridge, change what's in your freezer and change what's in your cupboards. The phone, I haven't got a good answer for that, because a lot of us need to use technology for work and just general life. But you have easy access to it in a negative way as well. So again, leave in the comments any answers you've got to that. I've had to just, I don't even think I've used willpower to do this, but over time I've replaced the bad habits with more productive things. So now instead of watching YouTube videos, I make them. So that uses up my time on the social media and on the technology. So another concept the author talks about is called self-binding. Now, I might get this wrong, but from what I can understand, is it's knowing you've got a problem and then creating a situation where you kind of cause yourself to not be able to do it. So this is a bad example, but I was driving my car a little bit too much, right? This is going to sound weird, but I'll do another example in a minute. But I hated the fact that I was always in my car. I was always driving, and I don't like the seating position. I drive for a job, and now I'm driving around my car. It was just annoying me. So a self-binding action would be, which I did, I sold my car. I can't drive a car that I don't own. So I've bound myself to, I can't drive it. And another example, if you promise to somebody that you're going to go to the gym with them, so say you make an arrangement that on Wednesday at 2 o'clock I'm going to come to the gym with this person, you've like bound yourself. So if you now don't go, you've got to tell them, now you can back out, but if you're a man of your word, you'll go. So you bind yourself. Again, I do this actually with YouTube. I'm now posting my weight and body fat percentage every day. And the day after I started doing that, I had a McDonald's and my weight went up. Now I'm bound. I have to succeed now, because although it might fluctuate in the short term, over the long term I have to succeed because I've put it out there, and if I don't, everyone's going to see it. So that's a good way of creating accountability for yourself. Now another solution, so that is avoiding the thing that spikes pleasure. Another solution is intentionally pursuing pain. So every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So when you dip down into pain, you come up past baseline into pleasure. This is why things like cold showers and sauna, exercise, eating clean meals reward you. Because although it's painful while you're doing it, like a workout, going for a run is essentially painful, and then afterwards you get that runner's high because you're going past baseline and you're getting the equal and opposite amount of pleasure. And I use this. This is how I cured depression. I was severely depressed, very bad. And cold sea swims, I live on an island, so I go down to the sea, and it was freezing. I did it all winter. My friend came with me once a week, every week without fail. And it cured me. And I would implement cold showers daily. And this is mentioned in the book. So cold showers for mental health, absolutely amazing. And like we said, life is too easy in the beginning, and that causes depression. The opposite of that is make life harder for yourself. So pursuing pain intentionally is one of those ways you can do it. Cold showers is perfect, and it's easily accessible. So if I remember to come back to it, I've got like the how to cure depression in 3 days strategy, and I'll mention that in a minute. So other ways you can pursue pain are workouts, fasting, dopamine detox, which is not using your phone unless necessary. Other things you can do are like go for a walk without headphones in. You're not listening to music, you're not on your phone, and you're not even thinking. We're addicted to thinking as much as we're addicted to our phones. Go for a walk and do nothing. Just be in the walk for half an hour, and that can be quite painful to some people. The being with their own thoughts is painful. And then we get into exposure therapy. So if you're anxious, and I've struggled with social anxiety in the past, and I still do to some degree, but I know what's causing it. Exposure to the thing. You're probably avoiding social situations because you're anxious. Well, you have to go and do it, expose yourself to it to get better. So pain to treat pain, anxiety to treat anxiety. So if you're in pain, if you're down here in pain, go have a cold sea swim and you'll be in more pain, and that'll treat it. It's counterintuitive, but it works, and it's worked in my experience, and it's worked amazingly for friends and family. So another step that the author mentions is radical honesty. Now the cold showers wasn't new to me. I already knew that, and it worked perfectly, so that made a lot of sense. Radical honesty, I guess I kind of did it anyway, but I've implemented it consciously after learning it. So say you're addicted to porn. If you don't tell anyone about that and you're secretive about it, you basically don't have to change. It's like the person who's secretly a gambler. As long as their family doesn't find out and it doesn't affect their finances, they can gamble all they want. It's kind of okay. Now, it might be doing harm to them and their family, but if their family doesn't know, you don't have to address it. The difference with radical honesty is if I tell somebody I've got a gambling problem, And now they start realising, oh, well, we can't go on holidays because Connor's blowing all our money on gambling. Because I was honest, it's another form of self-binding. I have to sort the problem out now because you know that I'm affecting your life. We can't go on family holidays. I can't buy the kids new shoes because I've got a gambling problem. That's not acceptable. Now, if I lie about it and just say, oh, I don't earn enough money, that's not my fault. I've tried to ask for a pay rise and didn't get one. But that's not the case with radical honesty. And I did this very early on when I was depressed. I went to my friend and I was like, bruv, we need to talk about this. I feel terrible and I'm in a bad situation. And then he would like ask me certain things. Well, what are you eating? What bad habits do you have? And if I lied and said I'm eating clean, I don't watch porn, I don't use social media, I'm essentially a saint and I still feel bad, he would have gone, well, I don't know what the problem is. But because I used radical honesty and I was like, well, I eat shit, I watch porn, these things that I was doing, I haven't worked out in 6 months. He can go, well, maybe if you do those, fix those 3 things first, it might solve the problem. So if you're radically honest, you can actually address the problem. But if you're not, it's not going to work. So it forces self-accountability and the accountability to others. So now that friend is like my training partner and we'll train together in the gym and we'll discuss diet. And I've got now a group, it's like, we call it the wolf pack. We've actually got a group of us that all are accountable to each other. So now on Sunday we all go to the gym. So if I go to the gym and I'm not lifting heavy weights like they are, one of them will question me like, why are you not lifting heavy? And I will have to say normally, and we know now, if you get poor sleep, that affects your performance. If you eat bad, that affects your performance. So I'll say, I think I got poor sleep yesterday, that's why I'm weak. Or I had a cheat day and it's messed up my food and I ate at the wrong time or whatever. So now we all know what we're holding each other accountable to, and it only works if you're honest. If I turn up for a training session and I'm weak, and my friend goes, why are you weak? And I say, I don't know, I got great sleep, I've eaten great, and I was lying to him, he can't help me. He can't help me address what the problem is. So the moral of that story essentially is you can hide behind lies. And if you hide behind lies, you can't fix anything. And when you tell people radically honestly, because we both had the same bad habits as men, you all have the same bad habits. It's bad food, bad sleep, using technology in a bad way, porn and bad relationships. We're all human and it's all quite basic stuff. But because we was kind of discussing this together, if he went a week of eating clean and I went 2 days, I've now got to say to him, he would basically outgrow me as a friend, and then I'm back to on my own. Do you know what I mean? I don't address anything. So when you have an accountability partner, you have to level up, and you have to level up at the speed of your peers. And that's how it works. You're the average of the 5 closest people to you. So you will naturally level up at the speed of your tribe. So the next point was journal. So deep journaling and talking to a friend. So when you write stuff down, it clearly expresses to you what the problem is. And when you talk to a friend, again, you get feedback and they can say, well, you need to address that. So I think that's quite obvious. Next point was accountability partner. I think I've just gone into that. You have to take responsibility, be honest, and tell somebody else where your fuck-ups are. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. So technology companies and food companies have engineered this to be addictive. That's not your fault. They should be like my butcher and my farm that don't make it addictive. They just provide me with a good quality product. So that's not your fault that food is addictive and technology is addictive, but it is your responsibility if you want to live a happy, healthy life and influence your children to have the same. It's your responsibility. So another term that I didn't know about is called pro-social shame. And again, we've already addressed this, but this is your tribe of people. So pro-social shame, pro means good or affirmative, and shame is you shouldn't do that. So pro-social would be, if we shame you into not doing something, the society benefits. I didn't explain that very well at all, but you'll get the idea. So, and I've used the example before of a library. When you go into a library, if you go into a library and act rowdy and loud, somebody will shame you into being quiet. Someone will look at you sideways and be like, they won't even say anything, but you'll know from the look, you're not meant to be loud in a library. And you're being shamed into doing what that culture's telling you. Same as a church. If you walk into a church and start swearing, somebody will shame you into not doing that. Now, you want to build a tribe of people that will shame you, like my friend, when he became my accountability partner. When I would mess up and do a bad habit that I wasn't meant to do, like an addictive behaviour, he's essentially shaming me. He'd be like, bruv, why did you do that? That's not cool. Like, you're eating shit. Like, I thought we said we weren't going to do that. And the shame makes you want to improve. Telling the truth draws people closer because now they can tell the truth and it's less embarrassing. So I'm always like this. I will always go first. In our friendship group, right, I will always be the one that says the embarrassing thing. And then everybody else feels like they can. So say I have an embarrassing experience. Say it's like an embarrassing sexual experience. I will just say it with radical honesty. I use radical honesty and humour together. I think if you say the honest thing in a funny way, it's all good. So I'll have like a weird or funny sexual experience where I've just, very embarrassing. None of my friendship group has ever mentioned that before. As soon as I say it, somebody else will go, oh, I had a similar thing and it happened to me. So when you do this, it's powerful because people think they're special, like their situation is terrible and weird and everybody's going to think they're strange. You're not that special, you're not that unique. We're all human and all of our experiences are basically similar. So no matter how horrific, if it's happened to me, it might have happened to you. There's no need to be embarrassed. And I think mental health, everyone talks openly about mental health now, but in the beginning I didn't talk to anyone about it because I didn't know anybody that had depression. It was just not a thing. Especially in my family, I was like, nobody talks about this. Now I've gone first. We talk openly. If my brother's down or my dad's down, we can just talk about it. So you're doing the world a favour by going first. So if I talk about porn addiction, that's an awkward thing to talk about. But any viewers or any people that are watching might think, oh, I can relate to that now. So you go first and it's very beneficial. And telling someone your flaws and verbalising what your flaws are is powerful because once you've said it out loud, you've kind of admitted to it and you have to address it. Like the person that's a gambler in secret. All the time it's a secret, it's fine. As soon as you say, now people are going to be expecting you to change. So that's self-binding again. So you want to create or join a tribe that instills pro-social shame. And cults are like this. Cults have a benefit. You can create a positive cult. The word cult has negative connotations, but it doesn't need to. Hamza Ahmed is a YouTuber that created a cult with very positive ramifications. So the opposite of pro-social shame, and we've talked about the hidden gambler man, everyone on social media is pretending that their life is great. We're all playing this game of let's all just pretend it's all good and life isn't one massive fuck up. Do you know what I mean? When in reality it is. Like I will post what I'm eating every day and I won't avoid posting when I've gained weight or had a cheat day. Like the other day I had McDonald's. It wasn't part of my plan. I didn't mean to do that. But I posted it anyway. And I now have to face the repercussions of anybody that follows me thinking, well, this guy can't stick to it. But that's where the benefit comes because authenticity, we're moving into the age of authenticity. And if you can do that, I think that's very powerful. So the way you do that is by basically just being completely honest, radical honesty, and admitting that life is hard, nothing's perfect, it's all basically going to shit. Like a lot of the stuff in my life's going to shit, and I just admit it and laugh about it. You use humour and honesty, and that's how you do it. And people will respond to that positively. They won't look at you and be like, oh, well, his life's shit. Like these shiny Instagram accounts where everything looks perfect. It's the ones where they come out and go, right, everything looks perfect, but really it isn't. You respect them all the more. So that is what I try and do with this YouTube channel. I'll be honest. I might not lose any weight. My goal is to reduce my body fat percentage down from 18% to 12%. And I take a long time when I do my goals. I'm not in a rush. I'm planning on living to be 120. I want longevity. So you might have to wait a while to see me succeed. But normally, I will succeed in the end. So if you stick around for long enough, you'll see me win. But I'll be honest along the way. And I think that's a good thing, and it's worth implementing. So, one more thing. So this is, again, to do with social interaction. This is more of a relationship thing, is oxytocin. Now, all pleasure seeking, oxytocin binds to dopamine receptors, and this is a chemical that is triggered when falling in love, mother-child bonding, pair bonding of sexual partners. So oxytocin is like the love chemical, and I've got a life philosophy that everything we're seeking for, all of this, like, we're all here to seek love. I think everything is a desire for love. I think that's a fundamental need of everybody. All pleasure seeking is a substitution for love. So, and I've thought of this for a while, that using oxytocin, so you get that when you hug somebody or giving somebody or receiving a massage. So like in Thailand, massage is a very well used modality for healing, and we don't really do that over here, but I think that's very powerful. Even if it's just like a shoulder massage to a friend or whoever it may be, you get oxytocin. Give somebody a hug, you get oxytocin. I'm sure smiling to each other, I don't actually know the science on that, probably releases oxytocin. Whereas consumption leads to isolation. The drug replaces the reward from being in relationship with others, so don't isolate. So oxytocin is gained from being in interaction with other people, normally a loving relationship or a parental kind of relationship or a deep friendship. So if you become isolated and use social media, food, gambling, you're hitting the dopamine receptors. You're becoming more isolated and removing yourself from oxytocin. So like a hack to this is, I don't know why this isn't a thing. I guess that I'm autistic or I'm too transactional, but you could like have like groups. You know, you've got AA meetings where people meet up and talk about how they're going to try and not be an alcoholic anymore. You could have like hug meets where there's just a group of 20 people meet up and hug each other. I'm sure that's probably a thing. I don't think I've invented that. Or you can go and get a massage. You can pay somebody to give you a massage and you're going to get oxytocin from that. Now, it's better if you just have loving relationships with friends, partners and family. But that's one option. If you're very socially anxious and isolated, you can just pay someone to give you a massage, and that's like completely acceptable. But you're getting oxytocin, which binds to dopamine. So you're getting that pleasure, the same pleasure you lack. So when you stop the vices and you remove those, you're going to feel pain. Now, if you can't handle the pain until you come back to baseline, go and get a massage because it will get oxytocin. Give somebody a hug. So I just feel like this is probably something I might do a course on massage, or I'll talk about this more in the future. You don't need to professionally learn how to do a massage. It's quite simple, but I think I anticipate the 2030s being like the 60s and 70s, and I think massage, because that was like the era of love. So a lot of people sometimes experience depersonalization, where they feel like they're almost not real and they're observing their life from a third person perspective. And this comes from when you're in the phone scrolling and you're looking at other people. You don't feel real. You're not living your life, you're observing your life. And the author says the antidote to the false self is the authentic self and radical honesty. And that's because you're pretending. You're looking at other people. Nothing that you're not living in reality at that point. So if you're on Instagram and you're looking at an Instagram model, he or she has catered that Instagram page so that everything false has been removed and they're only presenting the good. So they might have a chronic illness that you don't know about, but they look slim and fit. That's not real. In reality, if you knew them and they were being authentic, they'd go, oh yeah, I've got this chronic illness, it's terrible. And you have a chronic illness, and you're not telling your Instagram people that you have it. So you're both pretending, so neither of you are in reality. That Instagram model's lying to you and you're lying to them. No wonder you feel depersonalized, because it's not real anymore. The opposite to that is authentic self. Be authentic. If you put on there, I've got a chronic illness, I didn't sleep last night and I feel like shit, and the Instagram model goes, I look good, but I've got a chronic illness, I didn't sleep last night, I can't eat broccoli and I feel like shit. You're in reality now. That's reality. So social media allows for depersonalization. So this is a very long one, so I'll wrap this up and then I'll do a quick brief talk about your brain on porn and then we'll call it a day. Conclusion. We're all addicted to something. Constant pleasure seeking leads to pain. You are depressed because your life is too easy. Abstinence equals joy in smaller pleasures, lower baseline. So when you abstain from these hyper stimulating things, you return to baseline, and then normal things. Like I now can come out in this forest for like 4 hours and just listen to the sound of the birds and have a little fire. And to me that brings more joy. I used to have to go out drinking. Me and my friends call it the Dennis system days, right? We'd go out drinking to clubs. There's all, everyone's dancing, we're drinking, we're taking drugs. Like, that's a lot of stimulation. We're eating food, we're with friends. That used to just get me like hitting there. Now I can sit on my own or with a friend quietly in the woods and a fire, just talking or just in silence. And this brings as much joy. And the place you want to get to is as close to that baseline as possible, to the point where, and this is like where the monks have got it right, and again check out my other video, but you could do a drug and instead of it spiking you up and crashing you down, that's a roller coaster. When you can take a drug and have mental control, or drink alcohol, this is how people can sober up when shit hits the fan on a night out. You take the drug and don't let it spike you, and then the drop won't be as low. So you want to be on an even keel. You want to be on a level playing field sort of thing. And again, relationships. This is what wrecks men the most. You get in a relationship and you've got a high of being with this person you love. If that relationship doesn't work out, you come crashing down. But it's better to live your life. It seems mundane and boring, but you want to be the rock, the eye of the storm. So when stuff's happening, you go, oh, this is good, but I'm not going to sway too far. And then when things are getting bad, this is bad, but I'm not going to sway too far. And I'm like this now. I can have terrible situations, like when I cut my hand with a chainsaw. I didn't think it was that bad. When they got me to sign a letter saying we might have to remove your hand, do you consent to that before we put you under? Yeah, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that to be like, oh, I'm hard, but when you live this way, you go with the Tao and you walk the middle way, you think, well, could be good, could be bad. Don't analyse it, and don't be outcome independent. If this happens, my life's over. If that happens, it will be great. No, just walk the middle path, and that's where balance and true happiness in life is found. So self-binding makes it harder to do vices. Don't medicate. So if you're medicating anything, if you've got an illness and you need to medicate for that, fair enough. But like antidepressants, I don't think are the way to go. But again, I'm not a doctor, do your own research. Do painful stuff to push you back into the pleasure and to help heal you from this low quicker. Radical honesty, pro-social shame. All pleasure seeking is the seeking of love and oxytocin, so find that instead of using these addictions. Face the world and the boring mundanity of now. Life is basically boring. In comparison to these addictions, life is boring, so just face it. Be honest and authentic. This will help you be accountable and responsible for your actions. So, I'm running out of battery on the camera, but my 3-day depression cure. So my 3-day depression cure is, you need to not use your phone or social media unless absolutely necessary for friends, family and work. Cold shower for 1 minute every day. So you do a normal hot shower and then you finish on cold. It's called the James Bond shower or the Scottish shower. Fully cover your body in cold and then get out, and then you'll warm up naturally. Do some form of fasting and don't eat sugar. Do that for 3 days and that'll be hard. Life is easy when you're nice and warm, you have a warm shower, you're scrolling social media, you're never bored, you never have to face reality, and you're eating sugary foods. You're depressed because life is too easy. When you do this, you have your cold shower, you fast, even do a 24-hour fast, you'll find you start, because depression is kind of a numbness to life. Now, I could go deep into what depression is, but it's like a bleak, never-ending hopelessness. At no point in the future do you think things are going to get better. You become indifferent to things. You eat food and it doesn't taste good. Activities you used to enjoy don't satisfy you anymore. And this is just because life is too easy and you're overstimulating with social media and food. Remove it all for 3 days and you will start wanting to live again. You will start craving it. So even just say you don't allow yourself to have a hot shower. When you're depressed, you can have a hot shower and go, oh, I'm not satisfied with it. After a week of nothing but cold showers, you'll want a hot shower and you'll start wanting to live a certain way. So that's my 3-day depression cure. It's worked for me and it's worked for multiple friends. And it's 3 days. You know, when you get prescribed antidepressants, they say take this for a month. You've got to give it time to work. Well, I wouldn't recommend antidepressants, but nobody I've spoke to has had success with them. To any degree of happiness. It might make you numb to the depression, but it doesn't make you happy. As far as I'm concerned, some people it might work for. But the 3-day depression cure that I mentioned there does work. And it works quickly, so it's only 3 days. If you're like very deeply depressed and you're thinking about unaliving yourself, I'm just saying it like that because YouTube don't like certain words. I'm just saying try this for 3 days. It's worth a go. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to wait a month for antidepressants to kick in. So Your Brain on Porn, that book is just the next step. So you got these addictions, and we've spoke about sugar and quite low level addictions. Porn is hyper stimulating. It's very, it's on the level of some very hard drugs. And again, the book just mimics what Anna Lembke was saying, which is abstinence. You need to stop doing the stimulating thing. Deep journal so you can keep track of where your mindset is, and it's just getting your thoughts down on paper helps you figure stuff out more. Time in nature is very powerful. Exercise, cold showers, socializing, and replacing it with creative pursuits. So when you would waste your time, because watching porn gets you in the flow state, it's engaging, and there's a certain definition to get into the flow state, but it's engaging and it's constant novelty. So you need to find another activity that engages you in the same way. So I'm rapidly running out of battery on this camera, but and meditation and relaxation and mindfulness was another thing that Your Brain on Porn mentions. So they're very basic principles, but it's what actually works, and it's what's actually going to make a difference in your life and help you live a happy, healthy life and help you do the same for your kids. Hope this helps. Have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.